Good evening. Welcome to TVP Stories, our Facebook Live series, which gives you an insight into Thames Valley Police. Tonight, we're here with our new Chief Constable, John Campbell. Thank you for joining us this evening, John.
No problem.
This is your opportunity to ask John any questions you have. Please get them into the comments box throughout this evening. We'll get to as many as possible. Thank you very much to those who have already submitted some questions. So to start with, John, tell me a little bit about how you got into policing.
Okay, well, I come from a police family, if you like, so I've had a number of relations that were in the police, grandfather, uncles, cousins, and so when you're young, that gives you a kind of familiarity with the police in a way that not everyone has. So as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a police officer. And I can remember at one stage having a conversation with my mother, being worried that maybe the police wouldn't exist when I was old enough to join. So that obviously isn't the case and won't be for any time soon. So I joined the police cadets in West Midlands in 1982. Spent a year with the police cadets there, and then left, went back to college, ended up going to university in Hull, and then always wanted to be a police officer, never quite shook that desire. And then joined again in 1988 and have been in the police ever since.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you started your career in the cadets. We have a mini police and cadet scheme here. What words of encouragement would you give to those starting out or those considering joining those schemes?
Well, both the mini cadets and the cadets that are around the force area are really enjoyable places to learn about the police, and also an opportunity for young people to give something back to their community, and there is an awful lot of young people who want to do that. So I would encourage anybody that's either interested in joining the police or actually wants something to do outside of school or college, learn a little bit about themselves, learn about the police, learn about how the community works together and comes together, get involved in community projects in the local area. It's a great way to spend time. And there are a number of people that join the cadets who do want to become police officers, others that go off to other careers, but the kind of skills and the things that they do is a great foundation for whatever they go on to do in life. So a really positive way to get engaged with your local police. And we do have details of that and how you can join, or how your children can get involved in that on our website.
Thank you. And to help give an insight to anyone interested in policing, you've covered some significant events in your career. Can you tell us about some of the most memorable?
Well, I mean, so I've been in the police now for 30 years, and I've done response policing and neighbourhood policing and some specialist areas of policing, counter-terrorism, and then as a commander been involved in a range of policing operations. I think the one thing about policing is you can have such a fascinating career. You can have careers within careers. I mean, I was a police negotiator for some time, and that was fascinating. Negotiators are trained to deal with a variety of situations. It could be sieges, it could be kidnaps, but a huge amount of the work that you do is dealing with people in crisis, those that often want to take their own lives, and so being able to help people in those circumstances is very rewarding. And you have a very instant, response and take people away from danger. From a command point of view and from a policing point of view, well, you get involved in significant policing operations. So within the Thames Valley, I was the police commander for the Olympics events in 2012, and that was a big year as well for royal events. And obviously we have a big footprint in Windsor around the castle and the Queen. Also involved in the torch relay. That was in the whole of the southeast, and that was a wonderful event because none of us were sure quite what the torch relay was going to be like. In actual fact, it was a wonderful opener for the whole of the Olympics, and the actual feel-good factor around that was almost tangible. So that was a great operation, and then involved in the flooding operation of 2014 as well. So I was what's called the Police Gold Commander for that. So we had almost 2 weeks of unprecedented flooding in the Thames Valley, where communities saw their lives and businesses damaged by what really was once in a generation flooding, and to be involved in that and coordinate and command the police resources, but all the other efforts made by the military, local authority, the Environment Agency, community groups as well, was also very rewarding. So the thing about policing, and certainly from a command point of view, is that you are unable sometimes to stop, terrible things happening, because that's the nature of the world to some extent. But as a police officer or as a member of police staff, you can have a role in making things sometimes less worse, and that's certainly some of the experience that you have as a police operational commander.
And you've been recognised for your work as well. You received a Queen's Policing Medal. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes. So in 2015, I was nominated and received the Queen's Police Medal at QPM. It's a medal that's awarded for a variety of things. It can be for bravery and gallantry within the police service, and it can be in effect for, if you like, the sum of all the parts of the contribution that police officers in particular make to certain aspects of policing. So very proud to receive that in 2015. As with many people who receive such awards, there's always a sense of, well, I'm not sure I quite deserve it, because there's some great and wonderful people that do great things within policing, but very flattered to receive that. So I attended Windsor Castle in 2015 and received it from Duke of Cambridge, and wonderful day.
And if people listening are hearing about your career and are potentially interested in finding out more about policing and getting into it, we have an open day. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, every year at our police training centre, which is at Sulhamstead, which is outside of Reading, we have an open day where members of the public can come along and learn a little bit more about their police force. It has a range of displays, such as our dog section, our horses, some public order, roads policing are there as well. We have talks about different aspects of policing. So on occasion we've had talks from our major crime detectives, we have talks from our control rooms and our contact management staff. And what we try and do is really show what we do as a police force and gives the public the opportunity to come and meet their local officers and staff. And what we normally find is when people actually meet the police in different circumstances, sometimes they might meet us, then that relationship is really positive. And also, not only do people learn about it, but sometimes those people that may be thinking about joining as well think, well, that's the job for me. Because policing has so many opportunities for police officers or police staff to have such a fulfilling career in whatever choice or vocation people's careers take them.
And there's quite a few ways we can get involved in policing, isn't there?
There is. I mean, from Thames Valley Police, I mean, we have police officers who can join as regular officers, and we have a variety of schemes to do that. Police staff, there's a huge amount of jobs and careers as staff. Now, some of those are making a contribution to what is a large organisation. So Thames Valley Police, £400 million organisation, we need a good business to deliver operational policing. So some of that is the kind of things you associate with any organisation, such as finance, human resources or people directorates, technology. And we really benefit from people coming outside of those specialist skills and joining us. And then for those who actually want a kind of police career more operationally but are not necessarily wanting to be police officers, we have police staff investigators, we have scenes of crime or CSI, crime scene investigators, forensic teams, all of whom make a really important contribution to what we do operationally. And then on top of that, we have our wonderful special constabulary. These are members of the public who volunteer as, in effect, part-time police officers. And they are an important part of how we deliver policing, and really we value their support and their contribution, particularly when we have some reduced numbers for our regulars. And that's, in effect, a full-time officer. It's just they get paid expenses, they come and join shifts and teams and neighbourhood policing and do a wonderful job. And on top of that, we have a range of people who are just volunteers. And these are people that just come along and help out. And they do a variety of roles. Some are involved in administration. Some are involved in helping our training of our young police officers at training school, acting as kind of stooges and acting. So there's a range of things that people can do to get involved with their local police.
And of course, you've just taken your new role with us as Chief Constable. Pamela would like to know what you're hoping to achieve in your new position.
Right, well, I mean, to be Chief Constable of a force like Thames Valley is a great privilege, and it comes with, obviously, great responsibility. Policing itself is particularly complex at the moment. I mean, we have challenges of new types of crime that we have to learn how to respond to, make sure we've got the right kind of training, make sure we're understanding what the public want from us, at the same time as dealing with some of the historic types of crime that we've had previously. So that's kind of like a complex environment to work in, and we know we've had some challenges with some of the recent financial cuts. So in effect, what I really want to do is deliver an excellent police service and be regarded by the public as an outstanding police force. And we do that, I think, by concentrating and getting the basics right in terms of how we go about police in the communities. And there's some great traditions around how we do that, things that we know work very well. So having strong neighbourhood teams, you know, familiar officers and PCSOs who the community can get to know, have that relationship with, can tell them what's going on. We can respond as well. Making sure we've got good response teams that, you know, can get to jobs quickly, and then investigate and get justice for victims if people have been wronged by others. And that's the kind of like the complexity of the environment we're working in, but also there is about a simplicity of the policing mission that exists and always has to.
And we've had a little insight into what's available to people starting in the police, how to join, a little bit about what to expect as well. But during your career, how do you think policing has changed?
Well, I think the actual core responsibility of the police is still pretty straightforward. I mean, that's to protect the vulnerable and, you know, detect crimes and protect in that way. So there's almost like the crime prevention and the disruption that's a key focus, but also when things go wrong, respond accordingly and investigate, and also be there for people in crisis. Certainly over recent times we've seen, perhaps with the cuts from all of us across the public sector, that the police who are there all the time, available through 999 system, 24-hour response, we find ourselves sometimes dealing with people who perhaps we wouldn't have had dealings with in the past, people who are suffering from mental health issues in particular, and we are willing to step forward to help those people in the moment. But from a, if you like, from a force point of view, we recognise that maybe that's not our priority in terms of other agencies taking a lead on that. But we need to help these people when they call us, and so that's a challenge for us, one that we're willing to accept. But by the same token, are we the right agency sometimes to be dealing with these individuals who need help, but maybe not help from the police in the first instance? Certainly in terms of the kind of kit and equipment, well, when I first joined back in '88, which probably seems a long time ago to lots of people, I joined, and the kind of kit of equipment we had was pretty basic, hadn't changed really in maybe 150 years in truth. So, you know, I patrolled in shirt sleeves with a truncheon and a set of handcuffs. That's changed completely now. We have officers that are better protected than perhaps we were in the past. And some of the technology that we use and some of the forensic advances, the kind of like the mobile data that we take advantage of in the police, that's changed consistently, or, you know, quite considerably. But I think that the core skills of the police officer remain the same. Good communication skills, good sense of humour is really helpful, some grace and humility. We know that as an organisation, if we have to be a little bit more robust, we can, but we start off trying to engage with the public, start off smiling, and then if we have to, you know, get a little bit more robust with people that don't necessarily comply or are doing others wrong, then we will do. And that hasn't changed over 30 years. So still the same core principles, maybe some of the DNA's changed a little bit.
And the number of police officers, volunteers and staff is often a debated topic. Colin, Patrick and Bob have all asked, why don't we see officers on the streets?
Yeah. Well, of course we do see officers on the streets. There's less than we might want. I get that, and certainly less than I would want. I'd love lots more police officers as well. So across the Thames Valley, there's you know, maybe around about 2.4 million people. We have an awful lot more visitors as well, probably assessed around 6 million visitors a year on top of that. And we have around about 4,000 police officers. Now we have 3,500 police staff. That's all part of the one team for policing. So if you put those kind of proportions into kind of reality, that means that not everywhere will constantly be seeing a police officer all the time, because a proportion of those will be investigators. A proportion of those will be dealing with the kind of crime and threats that we respond to, which are very significant and important, but necessarily won't be the kind of visible policing that some people quite rightly want to see more of. So we have neighbourhood teams and we have patrol staff. On occasion, even communities where perhaps they don't have the greatest policing need want to see police officers, and we should be flattered by that. there are some criminal jurisdictions around the world that do not want to see their police because their trust and confidence in that uniform presence maybe not what we are lucky to have in this country. So the balance is there that we will always try and be as visible as we can be. Certainly from an able policing point of view, we are committed to that within Thames Valley Police and actually ring-fenced all those officers and staff to do that function specifically. In a way, a couple of years ago, they sometimes used to be dragged away to do other duties as well, but we've actually committed to that, to allow them to get on and work with their communities. So in answer to the question, I would like to see more police officers. Sometimes those areas that don't see the police, maybe it's because in actual fact the need for the police isn't always as acute as it is elsewhere. I do remember walking a beat when I was a PC back in Birmingham in 1988, and I probably walked the beat for 18 months or so. Earlys, lates and nights in all kind of weathers, and still at the end of that 18 months I was getting, we never see a police officer. So sometimes it can be people don't see them, but we are there, and we are there to respond as well.
And of course funding goes sometimes hand in hand with numbers in the force. Margaret suggests you get together with all the other chief constables and demand more resources from the government. What do you think about that?
Well, we do that in terms of all coming together as the National Chiefs Police Council. And what we do is that we collectively present a case to the Home Office, who then do that to the Treasury about what we need from a policing point of view. The Association of Police and Crime Commissioners also do the same and work closely with the PCCs in order to make that case for increased funding. We know that government have a number of choices to make. Our responsibility as a police service is to make sure that we're as efficient as we can be, making sure that we don't have any kind of slack in the system, so that we can, hand on heart, say, we're as lean as we can be. We've put as much as we can into operational policing. My view would be that we do need increased funding. We are starting to see some of the impacts of some of the cuts in a way that none of us would wish for. We've lost around about £100 million worth of funding over the last 8 or 9 years, and that's a significant amount of costs in an organisation. And certainly, we continue to make the case to government that we think we need more funds, and that's something that isn't lost on the public as well. So, and more recently, we benefit from some additional funding from the PCC as well, which we may touch on in due course. But from that point of view, don't disagree with the principle, and we do have mechanisms to do it. So thanks for the question, and fully agree with it.
And sharing information and efficiency is at the forefront of that answer, really. Robert would like to know why crime can't be reported at a police station.
Well, if a member of the public goes into a police station, they want to talk and discuss a particular sensitive matter with a police officer or a member of staff, that can still happen. We get very few people attending police stations in truth, and that's as a consequence of that, we actually changed some of the structures that we have around police stations in the force and closed a number of front offices down, although the police station still remains. Because when we surveyed people, they told us in actual fact, when contacting us, they largely wanted to contact us either online or by phone. And that probably reflects a lot of the way we live lives outside of the kind of policing matters that we deal with. So the simple answer is that if people were to attend a police station, quite often when the front office staff are dealing with members of the public, they'll direct someone to what is in effect a phone at the station, and they call our, if not, contact management centre and share that information, and then that, in effect, that's the crime reported. We do have an opportunity. You can report crime online via our website. And that's something we would encourage people to do. You get exactly the same service in terms of the response, the investigation, as appropriate. We still do that, but it's just a kind of like a more of a, if you like, a customer-friendly way of doing things, and is also probably meeting the needs of, if you like, a bit of a change in way that people interact with agencies. So the simple answer is that the way the system is set up, for if you like, for some of the minor issues in particular, then we do that over the phone.
Thank you. Now keep your questions coming in. We will try to respond to as many as we can. Mike would like to know if Thames Valley Police will fully merge with Hampshire.
Well, no plans anticipated. There's lots of debate nationally about, do we have too many police forces? Well, there's 43 in England and Wales, pretty much under the county structure. It happens Thames Valley combines 3 counties, Buckinghamshire, Berkshire and Oxfordshire, but one force area. And lots of debates about size of forces, whether or not there's too many. I think we'd all collectively agree there's probably too many forces nationally. We can see the real benefits of joining together, but that is quite, it's a very expensive thing to do. And two, sometimes, you know, the larger the organisation, sometimes that local feel can go a little bit to how you respond and deal with policing at a local level. So you have to take that kind of things into account. So as it happens at the moment, we work very closely with Hampshire Police. We have a joint operations unit, which are our firearms teams, our traffic police, our dog section, our planning teams. They all work together across both forces. We have a joint ICT department and information management department across both forces, and also our contact management department is joined across both forces as well. So we do a lot of collaboration because that actually can reduce costs and can sometimes increase performance as well. So that's definitely on the agenda. What isn't on the agenda anytime soon is a merger of both forces.
Thank you. Hannah asks, what master's topic would be best to study in order to become a police officer?
Well, it's interesting because I think when people are doing degrees, you know, a huge amount of the value of doing a degree, if you're studying in that regard, is just the kind of like the nature of the academic study, the kind of the thought processes, the analysis of information, the learning that comes out of that. So any degree, I would suggest, is a valuable foundation for joining the police, because policing is quite complex. And we are actually changing, you know, some of the entry aspects of that to reflect that. In terms of a master's degree, well, there's plenty out there in terms of criminology. There's plenty out there in terms of some of the forensic activity that we do. There's lots of theories about policing that would, if you like, keep people interested. So something around the criminal justice, something around the criminology, if you're particularly interested in that area of policing. What I would say is that academic qualifications are definitely one aspect which are an important part of being a police officer or police staff, because policing is complex, and we want the kind of like some of the skills that taking, you know, academic qualifications can bring. But there's an awful lot of other great skills that you need as a police officer. Good communication skills, you know, an understanding of, you know, good common sense. That's really important. You know, so it's a combination of both really. So maybe study a master's in the first instance you enjoy, because that definitely is useful to do. And then definitely, if you're still interested in criminal justice and criminology, that's definitely something that's available. But ultimately, it's one part of the, you know, the kind of the rich skill base that we want for people to join and be good police officers and police staff.
And George asks, what's the minimum criteria needed to become a police officer?
Well, in due course, we're just in the process of changing that at the moment. So from 2020, in effect, there'll be two ways of joining the police. This is a national structure. So in effect, you can join with a degree and you do a 2-year programme of qualification, and then in effect you become a regular officer. And the other way is that you join as a police apprentice. And that doesn't mean you have to be a particular age, particularly young age or whatever. Apprentices are for everybody. And in that regard, you join, you have in effect, it's around about the 2A level qualification or evidence of a similar kind of learning, not definitely associated with A levels, but we do take account of other forms of education. And then in effect, you go on to a 3-year police degree apprenticeship. So you do your police training, and at the end of it, you get a degree. And so it's around about those kind of levels of qualification. But we do want to make sure that we've got the kind of like the opportunity for people that bring different kind of skills to the service, and we can take account of that as well. So it's a kind of broad picture around those kind of qualifications. And then of course you have to pass a medical, you have to pass a fitness test as well, and then you have to do a range of other things to kind of show your communication skills, your interpersonal skills as well, in order to join.
Thank you. We've had quite a few questions coming in about specific crimes. John won't be able to talk about individual cases. However, we can take some more general questions about crimes and how you prioritise those. Beryl feels that reports of crimes aren't taken seriously and feels a bit fobbed off. What would your message be to her?
Well, definitely sorry that Beryl feels fobbed off, but I do understand that sense that sometimes certain types of crime don't get necessarily the attention from members of the public that they feel it deserves. We do recognise that, you know, we talk about policing priorities, we talk about different types of crime, and for certain types of crime, it might be what is regarded as a minor crime by some, but to the individual, it's really impactful. And we do recognise that. We do have to prioritise what are limited resources to the types of crime that we would think do the most harm. And if you think about it from a policing point of view, we have a range of crimes that are committed, and it's kind of quite logical, I think, and people do get this, that, you know, The community would rather us put invested resources into protecting children from, if you like, online abuse or, sexual assault, compared with maybe putting the same amount of resources into pedal-cycle theft or something like that. However, what we do as a general point of view is that whenever we look at any type of crime that comes into the police, we do look at the issue of vulnerability, because what might be a crime to somebody that could quite, robustly say, I've had my car broken into. We do get on occasion people recognising that we perhaps might not catch the offender, there might not be any CCTV, or the chances are low, and what they want is a crime number so they can report to their insurance. Okay, I understand that. By the same token, there might be someone that is being targeted for some particular reason, so it's the same kind of offence, but there's a bit of background to it. So we do take that into account. So from the point of view of the crime coming in, even if the investigation isn't as extensive as people might want, just to reassure that information is actually retained by us. We look at it, then forms part of our crime pattern analysis. That may impact on how we patrol. It certainly impacts on the intelligence and information that neighbourhood officers and patrol officers get on their area. And the local police commanders, the local superintendent and chief inspector, they will be reviewing all of those crimes and looking at the kind of impact of that, and are there any trends or are there anything developing. Also, we never close that crime. So whilst it might be that part of the investigation has come to a conclusion, and we want to share that and explain that to the member of the public, the actual investigation remains open. It can be reignited at any time, or reviewed or investigated at any time if we get further additional information.
Chris would like to know if Thames Valley Police investigate frauds reported to Action Fraud.
The simple answer is yes, we do. So frauds are really quite a challenging area. So, it's developing as well. So, we know that within a huge amount of fraud is committed within the cyber environment. It's about 57% of all frauds have a cyber footprint. And I think many of the people maybe watching this will have experienced some degree of what feels like a bit of a scam, a phishing on their email account, something along those lines. We don't all get those reported to us, and that's understood. But by the same token, the ones that are reported go into Action Fraud. That's a national organisation coordinated by the City of London Police, and then we will get some of those reports or investigations coming out into force. So we do investigate. What I would say is that from a fraud point of view, we would assess that 80% of all fraud is preventable. And those are big numbers. And that comes down to, if you like, some pretty, I say basic housekeeping, but we're kind of better at dealing with our physical property than we are with our data and our online footprint, if you like. And in a way that you might check the doors are double locked when you leave your house, so we sometimes aren't quite as good on things like passwords, changing passwords, etc., etc. So we can't really arrest our way out of some of the volumes of fraud that we've got, and some of it has an international footprint as well. So from that point of view, 80% is preventable. We'd encourage people to think about some of the crime prevention opportunities that we have and are available via our website and others as well. But where we do have fraud investigations, particularly where they are targeting vulnerable individuals, then we will respond and we do investigate. And we've had considerable success over recent times, some pretty large frauds. In fact, Operation Hornet was a fraud investigation into individuals that work within the banking system. And that was probably the largest fraud investigation conducted by our police force in a long time, and we successfully prosecuted a number of offenders for that last year.
Thank you. Sue would like to know what we're doing about fox hunting.
Well, fox hunting. So in Thames Valley we have we benefit, if you like, from rural communities and urban communities, and some of those communities have very different, if you like, lifestyles in truth. So fox hunting is one of those things that really does divide opinion. So on one hand, you've got people that want to go about doing their, if you like, their country pursuits, those people that have been brought up within the rural community. And then you've got others, also some within the rural community, who don't agree with the principle of fox hunting. Well, the legislation that was brought in basically allows a certain form of fox hunting, but obviously not where there's an actual fox. That's the bit that's the difference. So we do respond to fox hunting. We do find ourselves sometimes arbitrating between two groups of people that are diametrically opposed, to the activity, and that can be a challenge for us sometimes. But in essence, where we're presented with investigation or evidence of offences taking place, we will take action against those that may be too vociferous in the way they're responding to try and stop hunts, or by the same token, those in hunts that may be, if you like, illegally hunting or, again, reacting in the same way. So fox hunting is one of those things that divides opinion. We as the police will follow the law and the legislation and enforce it where we can.
Brandon asks, how long does it take to collect intelligence?
Right, well, intelligence is a pretty broad topic, really. So intelligence comes to us in a number of ways. So intelligence could be patterns of crime, it could be information that we get from members of the public, it could be our own officers that are, you know, trying to understand what's going on in the community. It could sometimes be from informants, those people that are kind of like contributing to policing. We do get a number of bits of intelligence that are reported anonymously by Crime Stoppers. So we have a very rich picture around intelligence. So all that has to be taken on board. We have a force intelligence department which is made of police officers and police staff and analysts that basically grab all that data, all that information, I guess mine it, you know, understand what it's telling us, and then that helps us inform emerging crime types or crime patterns or individuals that are suddenly becoming active or are active, and that allows us then to respond and prioritise them and if you like, tackle their criminality. So I can't really put a number on how long. I think the question was how long it takes.
Yes,
does it? Yeah. Can't really put a number on that. If it's information that is immediately representing threat to us, that's intelligence, we'll act really quickly on it. So, for example, if we had information that somebody might have a firearm or present a harm or threat or harm to others, we will act quickly. Sometimes it can be a longer burn or a slower burn, should I say, on getting the evidence or intelligence right.
Monica would like advice on how to keep her estate safe.
Well, I mean, there's been an awful lot of work lately. When new estates are being developed, there is a lot of relationship with the police and, if you like, planners and developers about how you create an environment where you can deter crime through the kind of like the buildings themselves, how you know, on occasion how properties may look onto each other, the kind of road structure, etc., the walls around estates. So that's something that is often dealt with by developers. From a policing point of view, one of the great things that we know works well is neighbourhood watch. So neighbourhood watch is where members of a community, often a couple of roads or 2 or 3 roads in an area, come together under the neighbourhood watch banner. They elect or have a coordinator that has a direct link into the local policing team, local neighbourhood team, and that's a way that really we can share information with that group, give crime prevention advice. Often our neighbourhood officers will engage with those neighbourhood groups and send out newsletters. And if you think of a practical point of view, you know, if somebody at one particular house sees a car that might be acting suspiciously or something that's making little people a little bit unnerved, then what they do is develop communication networks to share that in the community. So you have more eyes in effect on the street and communicate, and we can become aware of that, and we can also share information the other way around. So probably I would say that's one of the better ways of protecting a group of people who all live together. And sometimes that sense of community, yeah, we may have lost a little bit around that. You know, it can be quite anonymous living these days. You know, you go from your door to your car to your work, or you come in and everyone's online. So there is something around that, the neighbourhood watch, that does bring members of the community together, either physically or online, all with a shared desire to make their communities as safe as possible. That would be my recommendation.
We'd now like to share with you the real life experience of 2 people who were burgled in the Thames Valley.
I really felt afraid. Sam and I had both gone out to the village. We set the alarm before we left, and I came back home about half an hour later, and I noticed that the curtain at the bottom of the stairs was drawn, which is only done at night time. Opened the front door, saw all the muddy footprints all the way through the house, and the alarm went off, and suddenly there was a man on the stairs dressed totally in black, a black hoodie, black trousers, with the hoodie pulled right over his face. I put my hands out to try and stop him. He pushed me against the wall because the door was in the way. I hurt my shoulders and my back, and I was sore and uncomfortable for a very, very long time. they had a look round, came with me to have a look and see what had happened. He broke in through the window downstairs. He got a spade from the garage, which wasn't locked. He tried to prise the window open, found a big rock from the garden and threw that through the window. There was debris and boxes of jewellery strewn all over the place. He'd opened the wardrobes, the cupboards, put everything on the bed, and the only thing we could find was he'd stole one of Sam's watches. After the burglary, we were both on edge the whole time, and we took it in turns to go out. I would go out shopping, Sam would stay in till I got back. We just did not feel safe in the house and leaving it. And even at night, if you hear, or if we heard a strange noise, we would sort of leap out of bed and investigate. But it's made me very suspicious of anyone I see in the village walking by wearing hoodies, and I felt afraid. I really felt afraid. Firstly, get an alarm system, and also make sure that it is a very good quality alarm system, and also get them to make sure it is secure and tested. The garden shed now has an alarm in that, and I always lock the garage door, which I didn't do before. I would say to a burglar, just realise that it's not just the goods you're stealing, you are ruining people's lives. You are affecting them emotionally, and also you're just causing chaos.
And burglaries is a priority for you, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it will be a priority for us, I think, for many years to come. The Police and Crime Commissioner, Anthony Stansfield, consults with the public about their priorities. So that helps inform us in sheds and garages as well, so that's positive, that's good. But by the same token, you know, they're kind of like in actual fact, burglary is hugely down compared with many years ago. And it's a strange thing. One of the things I often talk about when I speak to community groups, comes as a bit of a surprise, is that some of the rates that we have in general terms around burglary is as low as it was in 1973. And when you say that, people often think in the past things were automatically a great deal better, but we were still suffering from certain types of crime quite significantly. And we've got back to those kind of rates, but it's something that we continue as a priority and will be pretty unforgiving about.
Matt's worried about his van being broken into and his tools potentially being stolen. What advice can you give him?
Well, I understand that from Matt's point of view, because that's his livelihood, I would imagine. So this is where that bit about vulnerability I talked about. So when we're assessing crime types, you know, a car being broken into, and a CD being stolen is quite different to Matt's experience, who's nervous about the impact on his livelihood. And so we do take that seriously, and certainly we've had a number of operations, and we're successful at one stage in Aylesbury in particular, I don't know where Matt's from, where we recovered an awful lot of tools because there's a particular group of people that are going out there to steal then to sell. I think the simple thing is, as much, if you like, personal security. I mean, it's a practical thing, I think, for a lot of people, because if it's a small amount of tools, as I guess frustrating as that might be, it might be worth removing them. I get that, but also that might be too difficult, too complex. So making sure there's as many kind of like crime prevention devices on the vehicle itself is probably the best way to do it. But the perfect way would be to remove the tools overnight or keep them secured.
A number of people have been asking about roads policing, especially middle lane hoggers, tailgating and people using their mobile phones while driving.
I can understand why that frustrates people. So if we talk about middle lane hoggers, well, technically the two outside lanes on a motorway are overtaking lanes. The inside lane is the one that people should use. The middle one is not the place for people to hog. It does cause a problem, particularly if they're going at low speed, because it means people have to overtake, move out inside. So we do recognise. So if police are about, and we have examples of this where roads policing have given words of advice to people who are driving in that fashion, that's something they will do if they see it, because we all recognise that. Roads policing itself is an interesting one, because people often think they want to support roads policing, but when they're actually then maybe stopped by the police or have enforcement action taken against them, some people then start to question some of our processes and tactics. We have tragically around about 70 road deaths a year in the Thames Valley. We had 11 murders last year, but almost 70 road deaths, and people see that in very different circumstances. So we concentrate on the types of offences that are likely to reduce road death, and that's about drink driving, it's about mobile phones in particular, and we know the government have increased the penalties. I think that's had a bit of an impact in people's usage, speeding and seatbelts, because those are the things that kind of contribute to people dying in cars. So we still maintain a roads policing unit. We have a very capable one, a very professional one. And we also make use of, obviously, speed enforcement cameras. Again, they divide opinion. We have fixed ones and we have mobile enforcement cameras. And they really target where we have data to show that there are problems and potential speeding and potential risk and threat, really. And often, particularly on the mobile ones, they are based on communities asking us to do local enforcement, because they have a concern about maybe the speed through villages or people using certain roads as rat runs. So the simple answer is roads policing, a really important part of what we do. Enforcement is an important aspect of that, because the whole idea is that we want to reduce road deaths and serious injury, and that's the whole reason why roads policing exists.
Jason and a number of other people are asking, what is TVP's stance on drugs and county drugs lines?
Well, the simple answer is that we will robustly respond to information about drugs and drugs dealing and county drug lines. So if people aren't aware, county drug lines is a relatively new term, and it describes how gangs from other parts of the country will use different ways of developing their drugs market in the counties. So they might move out of the cities, identify locations in a town, they maybe target vulnerable people, and it's called cuckooing, where they land, they start taking advantage of their vulnerability. Sometimes they might be drug users, so geographically have a footprint, then use, if you like, mobile phones then to kind of develop their market, and that's called a county drugs line in effect. So we might have a crime group operating that might be based in one city but operating somewhere else, if that makes sense. It's a priority for the force this year, because alongside the drugs, not only are the drugs obviously terribly dangerous for those that are using drugs, but also the kind of some of the violence that's associated with people maintaining their drugs market is just unacceptable. So from my point of view as a force, one of the priorities for this year is making the Thames Valley a hostile environment for those that want to come in and deal in their drugs. What I would say is that every drugs market has to have customers. So there is a reality around that kind of drug use that funds that kind of activity. So if people weren't using drugs of any sort in the first place, be it what we call Class A drugs, cocaine, or Class B, which is around cannabis, then there wouldn't be the market for people to use and take advantage of. So there's something that we'll be looking at this year about how we can, for those people that might believe that kind of like drugs is acceptable, they need to understand the consequences of those actions in terms of the wider issues that we have around drugs and county drug lines in particular.
John asks, do you think it's necessary to arm all officers?
I don't. We have I mean, in many ways, we should be very proud that our police officers generally don't want to be armed. I mean, they are facing violence every day. You know, in the last 3 months or so, 200 officers in Thames Valley have been assaulted in various ways. Thankfully, not too many seriously. They are faced with people spitting at them and being violent towards them, and they regularly put themselves in between that violence and members of the public. And yet, whenever surveyed, even after where we've had police officers murdered with firearms, the majority view of police officers is they don't want to be armed. And that's very precious, I think, because there's very few westernised or even any countries in the world that you do not have an armed police force. What we have is very specialist officers that operate, so we have armed capability, but they are not routinely armed across the street. So the simple answer is I don't think they should be. What we do need to make sure is that we need to make sure that we are making use of the kind of like the kit and equipment that does exist, and Taser is one of those things, to make sure officers can in effect deal with the threat that's presented. And we will be and have been looking at increasing the coverage of Taser, which is in effect the bit of kit that delivers in effect an electrical pulse to an individual and in effect, if you like, momentarily stuns them. And we are looking at ways we can make sure we've got greater availability to officers, and that kind of kit is very, very well, it's kind of, it has actually, we don't use it that often in terms of its actual capability, but the actual presence of it actually does deter quite a lot of violence towards officers and members of the public.
Policing has seen an increase in demand, which is a really important issue to discuss. John asks, how can we report something in a hurry without calling 999? He feels 101 isn't working well. What other options do we have?
I'd agree with, I think, John. Did you say John?
Yes,
yeah,
John.
So interesting, 101. So there's two ways of contacting the police via the phone system. There's the 999 system, and I would encourage everybody to regard that as, a 999 is for emergencies, when crime is happening, people are under threat. We do get a misuse of 999 systems, and everybody that's misusing it through convenience or lack of understanding, in effect, takes the time away from the police to deal with calls from people who really need us. We have really good call handling times for 999 despite that. The 101 system is where that's the volume contact that we have. Again, we do get people calling us that maybe we're not the agency they should be calling, so there is a bit of people reflecting on that. But what we did have, and certainly it was exacerbated last year, we did have poor performance around our 101 calls, so people having to wait too long. There was a bit of a kind of like combination of factors. One, over the summer in particular last year, very busy, very hot. We had a huge increase in 999 calls anyway. This was not just Thames Valley but nationally as well. And we always protect the 9 system, if that makes sense. So if we've got overwhelming calls, then people understand we go and protect the 9s and put our operators. That can lead to 101 delays. At the same time, we did have a bit of recruitment issues. So we had people leaving and not being recruited back in. We've resolved those issues now, and we are looking to put more resources into 101. And certainly over the last 2 months, because this is something that I look at regularly as part of our performance, it's a priority for me to this year, our 101 call handling time has been coming down significantly. So in terms of the question that's been asked, you can report online. If you're calling at 101, it might be, and you are reporting crime that's not time specific, maybe think of the best time to report. Things tend to get busier on late, in the afternoon into the tea time, as well as when it starts out of a weekend. So if it's non-time specific, maybe you can think about the right time to call or the time that might help us out in that regard. Definitely not via the 999 system to report a crime. If something's happening at the time, definitely call us on 999 system, but it's report something that's happened, it's definitely 101 or online.
We also have some examples of how 101 and 999 service have been used in completely the wrong way.
Hello, this is police.
I don't know if this is a waste of your time, but I'm in Slough High Street in the nail shop. The lady's trying to take more money than me than what it says. My nails haven't been done properly.
Right, okay. This isn't for police. It's certainly not an emergency. Okay, it's a civil dispute between you and the nail shop. Okay, regarding the quality of the product you received. If you don't feel that you're happy with the service, then you've got a right to dispute it. But that's a discussion to have between you and the store.
Good morning, Thames Valley Police.
Hi, good morning. Our neighbours just come round with their car into their house. Is that police flat or do you phone the locksmith?
So they can't get into the house?
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're locked out and it's not been forced or anything, yeah, they need to speak to a locksmith.
Locksmith?
Yeah, okay then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So it's really important that people use the 101 and 999 service correctly.
Absolutely.
We've had some questions coming in about other issues around policing. We're having a number of questions about the status of the Lea Croucher investigation.
Well, as people all may be aware, Lea went missing some weeks ago, and we have a large inquiry that's still ongoing into her whereabouts. We still have, obviously significant concerns about her well-being. We have had a lot of people supporting the investigation, and we still continue to use all that we can to try and trace Lea and get her home safe and well in the absence of any information to the contrary. So it was a particular issue. It's a Milton Keynes investigation and missing person inquiry, and we continue to do all that we can to try and trace Lea and get her back to her family.
Dan and lots of other people are asking about what's being done regarding knife crime.
Well, in terms of knife crime, there's an awful lot of national concern about knife crime and local concern as well. We have definitely seen an increase in knife crime in the Thames Valley, but not in the way that others may have seen in terms of assaults and murders. Generally we've had a reduction in grievous bodily harm incidents over the last year or so, but we have seen an increase in crimes where knives have been used as part of other crimes, so things like robbery, sometimes domestic assaults as well. So from that point of view, I mean, part of the role that we have from a police point of view is education, trying to understand or educate those that might be involved in carrying knives of the terrible consequences that can happen if they're used. At the same time, enforcement-wise, well, we are looking to increase our stop and search, particularly where we have people that might be using knives to kind of, if there's gangs. We don't have a huge gang footprint within the Thames Valley, but where we do, we see it emerging. That's something we want to concentrate on in particular as well. So the simple answer is that it is a priority for us again this year. We have welcomed some funding, additional funding from the government, which has I think been announced recently. So we will be using that funding to support policing operations, particularly where we have hotspots of intelligence around knives being carried or potentially being used.
Some people are asking whether PCSOs should have more powers.
Well, PCSOs are officers that are who work on neighbourhood policing teams, in effect. And they do have some powers. They have some powers of enforcement in certain circumstances. Perhaps one of the greatest strengths of PCSOs is that they won't be drawn away to other forms of work. So if I have police officers and I need them to work football matches, then on occasion people will be drawn away to do that because they have the powers to deal with that situation. Our PCSOs are wonderful members of staff. They can focus entirely on community engagement. They have a certain amount of enforcement, as I said, but use their coordination skills, their people skills, their visible presence in the community. And that's a real strength. So the more powers we give individual PCSOs when the case isn't actually made, then that can divert them from really that neighbourhood policing role, which is working closely with the community and staying on their beats and their areas. I do review that every year, what powers they do, because it's down to me to decide what powers they have, but we're pretty content with what our PCSOs have and the work that they do.
Johnny asks, where do you see TVP in 5 years' time?
Oh, Johnny, good question. So my contract as Chief Constable is 4 years. So certainly, 5 years takes us 1 year beyond that. I think from a TVP point of view, I want us to, well, I say the structures are pretty straightforward. I want us consistency around the structures. I want good call handling, so that when people call us, we answer the phones quickly and respond swiftly to people in crisis. I want to maintain our footprint on enabled policing and enhance that where we can, so we have good problem solving, so stop crime happening in the first place, disrupt criminal activity, ensure that we've got community confidence, that we're a visible and accessible police force, investigate appropriately, so we have different kind of levels of investigation according to crime, as you might expect, but where we have people that are wronged, I want us to get justice for them as far as we possibly can. And also, what we know about policing is that sometimes things can happen that we aren't expecting, but we have to plan for them. So something like I mentioned at the start of this the Facebook Live, talked about the flooding operation that we were involved in. So we never want it to happen, but we have to plan for the maybe, and that involves us having good specialist teams that can respond to those larger major incidents as well. So it's a combination of those factors, really. The reality for the public is that when things are at their very worst for the public, we need to be at our very best, and that's the kind of mission of policing for the Thames Valley.
And to round off, we've had some rather interesting questions. Jack would like to know if you've watched Line of Duty. Now, no spoilers if you have, please.
Right, well, I can help Jack because I haven't watched Line of Duty, and I never have watched Line of Duty. And that's not because I've got anything intrinsically against it. The problem with police officers, and people watching me know police officers, friends, family, they'll sit there watching police programmes, just sitting there going, well, that wouldn't happen, and that wouldn't happen. And there's two detectives doing a murder inquiry. Well, actually, there's about 40, and all that kind of rather dull stuff. So it's not great TV if you're a police officer to watch dramas. It can be very exciting. I hear it's very good. It's all about police corruption, which isn't the thing I'd rush to watch too much about, because it is drama rather than reality. So no spoilers, but I don't watch it.
Billy would like to know who you'd like to win the Premier League.
Right. Okay. Well, this is probably a little bit of a little bit unlikely in the short term, but my team would be is Aston Villa, and they're in the playoffs at the moment in the Championship. So I'm hopeful that they'll get into the Premiership, but whether or not they're going to win it in my lifetime, maybe not.
Danny would like to know, what's your favourite donut?
Favourite donut? Well, I don't know if Danny's linking this into the fact that the police are meant to eat donuts all the time. Favourite donut? Okay, well, I would probably go for something caramelly, caramel donut, something like that.
Ross would like to know, what's your favourite song?
Okay, well, it used to be Every Breath You Take by the Police, which is a bit themed, but then I understood it was all about stalking, which isn't a great song. It's all about somebody that might be taking too much an active interest in somebody else, so that's a no. So probably go for something like Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, bit of a crowd pleaser generally, so that probably shows my age rather than
Another football one, Himran asks, how do you think Tottenham Hotspur will get on tonight?
Well, I think yesterday everyone was a Liverpool fan. Even I think die-hard Man United and Everton fans became a little bit Liverpool last night, so that was great news to watch their success. I'd like to see Tottenham versus Liverpool in the final. I think they can do it. It's not quite started yet, but wish them well.
And is there anything else that you would like to add this evening?
Well, I guess I would just like to add that the real strength of British policing, and it's the same for Thames Valley, is that we are close to the community. Sometimes it may feel that we're not as close as people would want, but Sir Robert Peel in 1829 introduced the British policing, and he introduced in effect the Metropolitan Police, and he had to come up with a contract with Parliament to explain why they should trust in the new system of policing. So it's familiar to us now, but at the time it was a new body of men at the time who was going to enforce the law, and there was suspicion about that. So he came up with what's called the Peelian Principles, and it's kind of like a list of things that he said the police would do and how they would do it. And one of the key things around that is the public and the police of the public. And so we are citizens in uniform. We are the operational arm of the community of Thames Valley Police. We will respond to their priorities. We'll also throw a little bit of professional nous onto some of the things that we deal with, because some of the things won't be obvious to the community, but they're things we need to do in order to protect them from harm. And I would say that the men and women of Thames Valley Police are absolutely committed to protecting them. They often put themselves in harm's way. I've talked about the assaults that occur, too many by far, but they do that day in, day out. And sometimes, on occasion, we won't get it right. You know, we're not infallible. But I guess it's not to, please don't underestimate anybody, the passion and the commitment and the endeavour of my officers and staff. That's police officers and police staff. My job as chief is to set the priorities, get them the training, the resources, the kit and the equipment, you know, the environment for them to work as best as they can, and allow them to do their jobs. And then we've got wonderful staff. And we always look for the support of the public, and we do get wonderful support from the public as well. Sometimes what plays out in the media is a little less supportive, but we know that we do get great support from the people of the Thames Valley, and that's wonderful to hear and to have.
We've had a lot of questions coming in about recruitment as well. Any final messages for those who are interested?
Well, great to hear that people are interested in joining the police. As I say, I think it's a wonderful career. The great thing about policing is it's busy and it's challenging, and the worst thing about policing is it's busy and it's challenging. It depends on the kind of day that you're having. You see a dash of life that perhaps you won't be exposed to in any other environment. A lot of information about recruitment and the different ways you can join us, police officer, police staff, are all on our website. I'd encourage people to have a look and give it a go. And anybody out there, look forward to maybe working with you over the coming years.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, John, and thank you for taking part and sending in your questions. We got through as many as we could. We will aim to respond to some more of your questions over the coming days. We look forward to you joining us for the next TVP Stories, which is due in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you.